and they'll say, oh, meeting new people or going to a new event makes me nervous. Well, that's not strictly true. You make yourself nervous by choosing how you react to the situation. If you want to be better at sales as a real estate agent or running a business, just become.
Well, Derek, thank you for coming on today. I love having a best-selling author on the channel. So I appreciate you taking the time. Your book, I wish I'd have found this. Look at the lights, the glare. I wish I'd have found this years ago, but I found it fairly recently. I read it. I think for my viewership, what you put in this book is critical. So thank you for taking the time to come on today.
My pleasure, Joe. Thank you for inviting me.
That may be the prettiest setting background that we've ever had on this channel.
Don't be fooled though, Joe. I'm in Scotland. It's sunny today, but we do have a lot of rain, so you caught it in a good day today.
Oh, very good. Well, now you've had about 5 books published, right?
That's correct, yeah.
What what led you down this path to write this book? Did you have a childhood where you were really shy? You just saw there was a need for this. Uh, what was the what got you started?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. My first book actually was the sales book I wrote, which I wrote during lockdown. I just decided one day that I was going to write a book. And that came about on the back of I'd been at a public speaking club. And of course, I was saying to people things that I thought everybody knew that were common sense. And I said, of course, everybody knows this. And they said, well, they don't actually, Derek. And I thought, oh, maybe I should write about this. So I wrote the sales book. That went very well. Then did the body language book. And then I was doing lots of coaching for clients, and I realized the big issue was with communication, particularly it's got more of a business slant, that book. It's easy to read. It's not written like a typical business book. It's meant to be easy to read. But it was more particularly on the sales side, and also when you're managing people or you're trying to close a sale, you're trying to describe something, you're trying to engage people. Most people just didn't really have a clue how to do this. And I'd read a couple of other books, and I thought, you know what? I could combine my expertise in how the mind works because I did a diploma in clinical hypnotherapy and NLP. I don't really see myself as a therapist, but I was interested in the linguistic part of it and how people are wired and what makes them tick. So I thought, well, I can combine that with, and that's in the first half of the book, together with the second part, which is more of step by step, if you like, something people can follow. But the real secret's in understanding how people are wired. And that's why there's such a big component of that in the first part. Because if you understand that, then you can use your own abilities and develop new techniques yourself. Because paint by number is quite difficult, Joe. You know, if I say somebody, well, I haven't got a chapter on that particular bit, but once you know how people are wired, you can adapt. That's the key.
Yeah. Most of our followers are real estate entrepreneurs of some kind, and it's all in real estate mostly is based on relationships. And
Sure.
beginning a relationship is the hardest. And we do all these networking events. We do, obviously cold calling. It's hard to really begin those relationships. And when I was reading in your book, if I'd have known it before, it would have made life a little bit easier. But we want to build relationships. That's everything that drives this industry.
Sure.
Um, Getting to know people, and it's very hard because we do a lot of these events, and you walk into a room, and honestly, I'm from a very small town in Nebraska, 281 people population. And I went to the University of Nebraska, and I was so shy. I mean, when I had to go talk to people, my stomach would turn. And sometimes still to this day, I get that feeling of that kid from Nebraska, and I go in and meet some of these people in our industry. I'm like, oh my God. It's very hard for me. How do we overcome that? How do we get over that feeling of that shyness? What steps can we take?
Yeah, sure. Well, you see, when people are shy or they get nervous, and they'll say, "Oh, meeting new people or going to a new event makes me nervous." Well, that's not strictly true. You make yourself nervous by choosing how you react to the situation. And also, if you think about it, we don't get nervous when we speak to our friends or our family. In fact, many of us can't stop talking. We meet our friends, we go down to the bar, we don't sit there and get nervous. So what is it that causes this? Well, it's the internal thought process of people think, well, what happens if I make a fool of myself? Or what happens if I can't think of something to say or I say the wrong thing? But actually, it's quite easy to do once you've got a method and you understand how people are wired. Because if you want to be, I've had conversations with people, Joe, about topics where I know nothing about the topic. And at the end of it, they said, you're such a good conversationalist. I haven't said anything. All I've done is ask them questions. So all
Yeah.
you do is if you want to be seen as being interesting, be more interested. And the first step involves, it's very simple. There's two methods to do this. You can either get yourself in the right state and develop a genuine desire to get to know that person. Now, I've always had this curiosity, and it doesn't matter who I'm speaking to, whether it's the people that were digging the road behind me in the behind the window there. I've always had the attitude that I can learn from people, and nobody has a monopoly on knowledge.
Right.
So once you have that, that makes it easier because what happens is your voice then becomes congruent, your body language becomes congruent. For people who find that harder, the easy way is just to show a genuine interest in somebody and find out about them. Who doesn't like somebody who's interested in them?
Mm-hmm.
But what
Active
happens,
listening is
Joe,
what
is
you're saying,
most people
right?
can't wait to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
They'll say, how are you, Joe? And then you start talking, you say, well, enough about you. Let's talk about me. And of course,
I
that's
see
not the
that
way
once
we
in a
want
while.
to And of course, that's not the way it works. But when we were at a networking event, and we've all been there, my background was asset management, and I used to have to go to lots of these events,
Mm.
and it can be quite tricky. But what you do is instead of coming up, if I come up to you and said, hey, Joe, I like your jacket, it's a little bit creepy. You know, it's a comment about a personal item. So what I do is I talk about the situation, occasion, or location. And we talk about that in the book, and there's some examples in that as well. So we may talk about a very interesting one, for example, if you're walking down the street in Edinburgh, there's always a shop that changes or a pub that's changed from one to the other. And if you say to somebody, I'm curious, I like the word, I'm curious. I'm curious, what shop used to be there before? Do you know, I've walked that street every day. I should know, and I just can't remember. And then you get people out of their trance and they start thinking and going, well, actually, that's a good point. What was there together? And then the two of you are looking at the external situation, and then you can start talking about personal things. But if you just come up and say, hey, what do you do for a living? It's a bit
Mm-hmm.
intrusive, you know? So we
Yeah.
have to wrap things up. It's like a gift, Joe. Everybody likes a gift with wrapping paper, don't they? Well, it's the same when we're questioning, getting to know people.
More open-ended questions, right?
Yeah, open-ended questions, but a little bit of caution with one in particular, Joe, and that's the question why. Because
Mm.
if you ask somebody why, what happens is they tend to become a bit defensive. If I said to you, why did you buy that jacket? You immediately go, well, what's wrong with it? And he's not getting defensive. Whereas if I use the what instead of why, and I said, I'm curious, Joe, what is it about that jacket that attracted you to it in the first place? It's much softer. It's getting the same information, but it's much softer the way we do it, isn't it? So we
Very
need to
much
be a
so.
little bit careful with why. And when we're using open-ended questions, the last thing we want to do is to come across like it's the Spanish Inquisition. Where do you live, Joe? How long have you
Yeah.
lived there? Who are your neighbors? What
Yeah.
do you do for a living? It's too much. So what we have to do is we use a couple of techniques. A very simple one for your viewers and listeners is to use question, comment, question. That's the easy one. We start off and say, nice to meet you, Joe. I'm curious. How long have you lived in these parts? And you say, well, I've lived here for a number of years. And you say, oh, it's always nice when you live somewhere for a while to get to know it, isn't it? And I use the tag question there. So using isn't it causes you to nod, and you play this video back, you'll see you're nodding there. And when you do it, it's very difficult to resist, even though you know I'm doing it, isn't it? And you get a slight nod again. So we can use that. And then we ask another question. So the idea is question, comment, question. Now, the idea is not to talk about yourself at this point. It's a quick observational question or comment about something. That sounds fascinating. Tell me more. Or I'm curious. It's interesting living around these parts. Lots to do. What do you like doing most? And then on to the next one. Now, the next stage, if you're good at that, is you use question, echo, comment, question. That's where we echo back what somebody has said. Now, many people will say, you can't do that, Derek. People are going to spot, it's far too obvious. Well, when I first came across this, it was on a training session. And I saw the trainer do the echo technique. And somebody in the audience said, you couldn't do that echo technique. It's far too obvious. And he said, so you couldn't do the echo technique. It's too obvious. And he goes, yeah, right. People would pick up on it immediately. And he said, so people would pick up on it immediately. And he kept echoing him back for about 15 minutes. The audience started laughing, and eventually the person picked up on it. People are too wrapped up in themselves. But the reason we do the echo technique is because what's the most important words that somebody hears? What's the words they've just spoken, isn't it?
Mm.
They're the most important. Well, think about it for your viewers here. When you look at a picture, there'll be you and your family or your friends, a group photo. Who'd you look at first?
Yourself, of course.
Exactly. And guess what? Even if you've got children as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's just the way we're wired.
Mm-hmm.
So it's key that we have to realize that people are quite self-absorbed. We're all actually very self-absorbed. And we have to hack into that. And the way we do that, show interest, is through asking open questions. And we can soften the questions further if you're in business, or if your guys are speaking and it's a tricky real estate situation and you want to ask a question and it's a real humdinger. I don't know if that translates well to the US audience, a real tricky
It works.
question. then you want to wrap that up. So what we would do is we would use some language softeners in the front and say, I'm curious. I hope you don't mind me asking. It's just so that I can understand more about your proposition. What is it about this that you're offering? So what I've done is I've used a couple of psychological biases there. I have used the wrapping paper and I've given somebody a reason. Now, when we give people a reason, it doesn't even have to be true, Joe. It just has to be plausible. They will tend to comply. If I said to you, because there's something I write about this, I call it the FU, will be polite channel, the FU situation, which is if I said to you, Joe, get me a coffee, will you? There's a little voice inside your head that goes, FU, get your own coffee.
Yeah.
Now, if I said to you, Joe, I'm just about to go on a Zoom call with an important client, could you get me a coffee, please? It's plausible. And you go, yeah, sure. It's reasonable as well. So there's all these little linguistic techniques we can use to get what we want, because to get what we want, we have to get the other person getting what they want.
Yeah. Don't you think it kind of all starts with active listening? Because when I'm out doing some of these and I'm talking and somebody else is standing there and they're just waiting to talk, you're like, oh my God, you know what? Go ahead and talk. Don't you think? I mean, I believe that's showing that you're actually listening to them is a huge component in getting to know somebody.
Yeah, that's a really important point. You've hit the nail absolutely right on the head there, Joe. Nobody likes the situation when they speak to somebody and not only are they not listening, but they appear not to be listening.
Yeah.
This is why the echo technique is so good, because it forces you to listen to what they're saying so that you can echo back. But there's a couple of other things that you can do as well. And these are unconscious displays that you are listening. So if you, next time you're doing a presentation, Joe, or you see an audience, just watch for people who tilt their head like that,
Yeah.
about 20 to 30 degrees to the side. Now that is an indication that somebody is listening. So if you're doing a presentation and you see somebody doing that, you know they're listening to what you're saying. And then occasionally you just do a nod. Now, we can do this auditorially as well by just saying occasionally, right, okay, that sounds interesting. Okay, got it. Right. So we're doing that. Now, this little trick about tilting your head is fantastic because I've worked in asset management before. And I've got to say, at times, some of the meetings where I'm sure some of your listeners will identify with this, shall we say, challenging
Yeah.
and not the most interesting.
Yeah.
So one of the ways you could do this if you want a bit of downtime to yourself is tilt your head to one side. The person will unconsciously pick up that you're on their side, you're listening, and just nod occasionally. So it's a great thing to do. And you'll find that you can get people nodding by using the tag questions, which I did earlier, which is, doesn't it? Isn't it? Don't we? Haven't we? Mustn't we? These sort of things.
Yeah. You know, I think something that I also see is, and you touched on it in the book, was understanding the person you're preparing to talk to, actually judging them, you know, and there's a lot there. It's judging them. It's looking how they're walking, how they're reacting. Can you kind of unwrap all that for us, please? Because I think it is so important because I'm guilty of it. I'll look at something, oh, I don't think I can talk to them because they're dressed perfectly or, you know, I don't know what it was. I found a reason not to talk to somebody. And I think I was using judging them as an excuse. But could you kind of unwrap that whole process?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're picking up on humans just can't not communicate. In fact, the
Right.
very act of not communicating is an act of communication, if that's not confused your viewers too much. So we're communicating both verbally and non-verbally. So you're right what you say. We can pick up an awful lot about a person by the way they walk, the way they stand. So dominant people, for example, don't tend to move much. They don't tend to have much eye movement. It tends to be quite static. Everything is about control because the whole principle of body language, which I wrote about as well, and that links in nicely to this book, the Talk to
Mhm.
Anybody book, is that the outer expression is a reflection of the inner thought. For example, people say, well, I can't read body language. And I said, oh, really? Suppose somebody was chasing you down the street with an axe. What do you think their intention would be? And they go, oh, yes, I get it. So they're saying they can read it. It's just the
Yeah.
degree to which we read it. Now, getting back to your point, assuming that you have read the body language and the nonverbals, and you're getting this feeling that I don't really like this person. They're not really on my wavelength. In fact, I'm not sure I like their value set. Now, there's a trick here, and I used to use this all the time. There were many people in business that I dealt with, and to be quite honest with you, I just couldn't stand them. I didn't like the whole value set they had. They just weren't my sort of person at all. I didn't really like the way they went about, they conducted themselves. However, what you can do is, in order to make sure that you have this unconscious display that you like them, you focus hard on something about them that you like. Now, that may just be you like the tie, the necktie they're wearing. It may be that you admire how well they run the business. You may like the company logo. You may like the jacket they're wearing. Whatever it is, you place your attention on that, and that helps you get you in the right state. So you're looking for things that you like about them rather than things that you don't like about them. Because we live in the duality of the physical plane. We wouldn't know what darkness was if we didn't have light. So consequently, somebody can't be all bad, although some people do give it a good try, I've got to say. But there will always be something about them that you can focus on. Hey, they've got a great car. You know, they've got a fantastic house. They've got a lovely family. The guy may be difficult to deal with, but he's a family guy. He
Right.
may vote the same way you do. So there's all sorts of things you can look for and focus your attention on that.
The being aware is something that I really, that part in your book really, because I'm pretty aware of when I walk into a room, I kind of scan the room, and I've noticed as I've gotten older, I've gotten a lot better at that. Is that
Yeah.
something that I've trained myself, or is that just evolution in this business, or what? Can you train awareness?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it definitely helps having miles under the bonnet.
Right.
So as you get older, or I should say the hood rather than the bonnet, miles under the hood,
Yeah.
that helps because
Yeah.
you've got more experience to draw upon, and it definitely comes with age. However, you can train awareness. What is surprising, Joe, is how low people's awareness is.
Mm-hmm.
We give people far too much credit for noticing things when they just don't notice things at all.
Right.
So the big thing, the biggest problem I see most people having, and you alluded it to earlier, Joe, when you're talking to somebody, is they're too busy thinking about what they're going to say next. Let's talk more about me, and a little bit more about me, and even more about me, and not listening to what you're saying. So we need to get away from that internal voice, the little voice we all have that talks to us, and focus on external awareness. Now, you can train yourself to do this. Now, if you think about reality, let's not head into the world of woo here, but let's talk about reality. We construct our reality through our senses. So the data comes in both visually, auditorially, with taste. We also have auditory digital where we talk to ourselves, and we have smell and sound. I think I've covered everything there. So that's how we create our reality, and we're moving around those all the time. So we can train ourselves by simply walking down the street and commenting about what we are seeing. Now, you can see there I said seeing because I tend to have a bias towards visual. But we would also describe what we're hearing. So in the background, you may see some buses go past. So if we see a bus, what does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it smell like? We don't want to taste it. Well, some people might, you never know. What does it, what does it sound? How does it feel? So we're looking at all the senses and describing this, and that will get you in the habit of getting out of the internal world, the little voice, and into the external world.
You know, and here's what I was thinking is when you were talking about this was, you know, we're training about 4 young agents right now, and I have been amazed over the years how younger generations just aren't aware of a lot of this actually. That really, and when I was going to school, we were trained on, but they're just not aware. They're just, I think it's because they just weren't as social as we were growing up. Um, and are you seeing that as well in the younger generations?
I am, yes, I am. Very much so, Joe. I see it as that's why I wrote the books in the first place. I thought everybody knew this because for me it seemed common sense, but people are not getting the training. I think as well they're not getting the same social interaction. Perhaps there's more social media, there's more isolation with video
Yeah,
games. I mean, I used to play video games when I was a kid, but I had to go down to the local chip shop or French fry shop to play it,
yeah,
using just about old money, not quite. So I see this amongst a lot of particularly young people. And if you want to be better at sales as a real estate agent or running a business, just become more aware.
yeah,
And it's all about practice. One of the issues I see is people come and they maybe come some of the training I'm doing and they try and do everything all at once. So sure, far away to fail at everything is to try and do it everything at once. What you
yeah,
do is take a little bit, think about it as a jigsaw puzzle. You take a little bit at a time. Once you've got that slotted in, time to go on to the next one. We
mm-hmm.
don't just go in and throw all the pieces in and start wobbling them around. We need a
Yeah,
little bit of structure. So this is what I would suggest that people should do, but definitely amongst younger people, particularly in business. And I don't get it, Joe, why that more companies are not training their people. And I'll give you another little tip for your listeners, actually. And this is one that I've developed myself simply due to the frustration of dealing with call centers. My books are listed on Amazon, so I have to deal with Amazon quite a lot. One of the tricks is if you ask somebody a question, you will be astonished at how not only don't they understand the question, they think you've asked a different one. So a simple way at the end of it, after you said your question, is without offending them, say, just to check that I've explained this properly to you, would you
right.
mind repeating back what it is I'm looking for and what I'd like you to do? And you would be surprised at how many people answer a totally different question. Now, if you're in sales and you're selling real estate, and
Yeah,
you've not listened to the client and you're going on and you're talking about how wonderful the swimming pool is, and you find out he's got a fear of water, it's not going to help you, is it?
yeah. It's not, and you know, we see especially, and this goes with even older agents. They're so busy trying to sell, which in this day and age, all of the information on commercial real estate is on the internet. So it's more of an information controlling business now than it is a real estate business. You've got to understand what's going on in your marketplace. You've got to understand. So you really have to listen to what your client is actually telling you because we've all been ingrained. Okay, this is the property, this is the price. They may not be asking you just about that. They probably know a lot of that already. So you have to be listening to what they're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just use you have to understand how people are wired because we're all creatures of emotion with some sort of logic thrown in there. A two-seater sports car just isn't logical for anything really other than having a bit of fun. And those red-soled high-heel shoes that the ladies wear, they're really not practical for going anywhere, but they look good, don't they? And people feel good when they wear them. And so that's the clue.
Yeah.
It's feeling. So when people buy, I've got a public speaking book, and it's how to speak effectively without fear in public speaking. But people are not buying that book for public speaking. That's the thing most people don't realize. And you go, well, hang on a minute, Derek, it's about public speaking. Of course they are. Well, they're not really. What's happening is they're buying it emotionally. They're going, I've got a problem.
Hmm.
My career is going nowhere because I'm struggling to speak. I don't look confident. I'm not getting the promotion. I'm not getting the opportunities with the opposite sex. The logical mind comes in and goes, I know, we'll sort this problem out by making you better at public speaking. Therefore, they buy the book, which is like the plaster to go over the wound. Does that make sense? So when people are buying real estate, it's my opinion that they're not actually, you're not selling them a house.
Right.
They think they know what they want, but they're buying it emotionally. What's it all about? It's how they're going to feel when they're in that house. How suitable is it going to be for the children? How safe is it? How good is it as an investment? What's the local school like? It's a
Mm-hmm.
feeling thing rather than a tick box. Now, here's the big thing. Imagine if you don't understand this, you're not going to go very far with selling. Imagine that I saw a lady at the bus stop and I thought, I quite like the look of her. I'd like to marry her. So what I do is I put together 10 very logical reasons as to why she should marry me. I go up, hand her the list. What success do you think I'm going to get? Well, bizarrely enough, it's such a strange thing to do. It might actually, it's a cracking pattern interrupt, but I'm not going to have a lot of success there.
Right.
But that's winning the logical argument. We don't win logical argument. You have to sell emotionally and justify with logic. When you go to the bar with your friends, or if you're down in the golf club, you don't sit there and go, do you know the average rainfall in California is so many inches? Did you know the tallest mountain? And did you know the average snowfall in Mammoth Mountain is? They're going to go, Joe, what's wrong with you? What
Yeah.
happens? We talk about stories. You say, you're not going to believe the week I've had. I had this crazy client. You're not going to believe what happened. Really? Tell me more. Well, if that's the way that we behave when we're in a social environment, why do we suddenly behave weird when we're in business? Weirdly? Is there such a word? Or behave oddly?
So I've got a friend that he'll put those facts out like you were just talking about in a social setting. He'll talk about the rain and that how much snow, and it is really not the situation. Everybody kind of they go along with it, but I'm always thinking, what's going through their mind when he's giving that? Because he's just giving it to be part of it, and I always wonder what's going through their mind when he's giving this data out when it really has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Yeah, and we have to bring things alive as well. We use stories. I mean, we think in pictures. People talk about, get a hold of a corporate brochure and read it. They talk about corporate strategy. Make a picture of corporate strategy. Can you make a picture?
Yeah,
Difficult, isn't it?
yeah, it would
It
be.
might involve a previous experience because you and I have been round the block a bit, but for most people, it's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Merger and acquisition strategy. Well, like you make a picture, but if you can bring something alive. So if you were talking about the house, it's what are the variables in the house? Well, how does it look like? What does it sound like?
Mm-hmm.
What does it smell like? Which is the old coffee trick and vanilla trick.
Yeah,
What is it? How good is it? How does it make you feel?
yeah,
All these things are bringing the experience to life rather than saying, well, this has, X bedrooms. Well, so what? What does it actually mean? Well, what it means is you've got an extra bedroom. Should you want to put a pool table in there or work from home? Everybody's now working from, it's which means that. And I learned that very early on in my career. There's a lot of people, Joe, in the sales environment who engage in what I call product vomit, which is, I hope
yeah.
you know what vomit is in the States.
Oh
Hopefully,
yeah.
so the idea is that what they do is they do a couple of quick questions. So Joe, you're interested in a new house. That's the fact find. Let me show you this. Fact, 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 fact. It's like a woof
Yeah.
without actually working out what is it you want. What's the key driver emotionally? What are you looking for? And then filtering down what that property has or whatever it is you're selling and relating that to the selection criteria that your logical mind has produced for you based on your emotional thinking.
Yeah, that's the problem that we really have in our industry is we know all the data. We want them to know that we have all the data. So we just kind of do a data dump or vomit. And, and it's too much. You've got to understand your client, and that comes from listening to them and understanding what they're really asking you. Um, you know, One thing we were talking is the confidence issue. We have that with our younger agents because they're just getting started. I think body language, having a confident body language, is very important. And could you kind of touch on how to be more confident with your body language as you're trying to bring in a new client or become friends with somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. The two ways of doing this. The first I've touched on earlier, which is the getting your state right. Now there are techniques, and I talk about this in it's in that book and also in the other ones as well. How to get yourself in the right state, because the
Mm-hmm.
outer expression is a reflection of the inner thought. It's very hard to disguise it. You will leak signals. So if you can get yourself in the right mental state, then what will happen is your outward display will reflect that. But let's assume you struggle with that. So let's think of this as a bit like an automatic car. That's the automatic car, but sometimes we want to get the gear stick or shift stick, I think you guys call it. So we want to override it. We use a shift
Right.
stick. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start using some manual override. So think about it. All you have to do with communication and body language is just do the mirror trick. Flip back and think about somebody who's confident. Just think for a minute. How do they look? Well, if they're confident, it's all about control. They tend to stand tall. They make themselves taller. The head goes back slightly, not too much, so you end up sneering. We talk about looking down your nose at somebody. So we need to be careful about that. So we stand tall. We control our body language. Think about the feet. Now, if you want to have a look at a presenter and you want to know how confident they are, you have a look at the legs. The legs are always the giveaway sign. Think about people who are confident. Military personnel, policemen, how do they stand? Well, the feet are wide apart, aren't they?
Yep.
Think about someone who's nervous. They make themselves smaller. The legs are close together. They cross their arms. They cross their legs. They're literally trying to make themselves invisible. So we want to get into the habit of making ourselves, controlling our body language, make ourselves bigger and start using palm displays. Now, palm displays are indicative of confidence and trust. Just notice how this feels, Joe. I don't know if it will translate well on the video, but if I said to you, Joe, it's important that we do this.
Yeah.
Can you feel it? It's an emotional thing. You'll never, ever point at anybody. Notice how different this is. It's important, Joe, that we address this issue. I don't know if you can see my hands there, and
Yeah.
I can't see the camera, but so it's subtle things like that. So we want to make sure that we control our body language, and you can practice this. And if somebody, I get it, for younger people, they can feel a little bit nervous. They go, you know, that old guy over there. With age comes authority, because the older you get, you kind of have this little gene that clicks in where you don't care as much.
Yeah.
You go, you know what? Somebody doesn't like me. Well, you know, you can't win them all. And it's almost,
Yeah.
you have a bit of a laugh about it. When you're younger, you maybe get a little bit hung up. But one of the ways you can do to diffuse authority is, it's a little bit of a crude technique, this. I hope your viewers don't mind, but you simply imagine the other person sitting on the toilet. We all have to go there.
Yep.
And that immediately takes away the authority. But think about it logically as well. That's just another person. They're not some sort of superhuman. They're governed by emotions. They have all the cognitive biases that you and I have. They just happen to have been in or managed to get themselves in a position. And in fact, many of them suffer from imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Which is they feel that they shouldn't be there. That's why, particularly in the UK, we have a lot of these. I don't know, I better not go there, but let's just say people get up to things that they shouldn't do or in high positions, and let's just leave it there.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, when you walk into a pitch, sometimes you'll have a good sized commercial real estate deal you're working on, and you have to go in and meet with a team of people.
Sure.
You know, even to this day, I find myself, I'm scanning the room looking for who's really in charge.
Great.
And more often than not, it's not the person that's doing the most talking. But you'd be surprised how just by scanning the room and looking at the way people, their body language, you can tell who's in charge. And, you know, but you also can see people that just don't want to be there.
Yeah.
And I try and include them as much as I can so they get more comfortable and feel like they're part of it. Um, but that's helped us win a lot of deals.
Yeah, that's a really, really important point there. And you're absolutely right. If the people are standing, if you'd read the body language, the other people's feet will always point to the dominant person, the
Yeah.
person who's in charge. Often you'll find that the person in charge, if the second in command will sit on the right-hand side. Not always, but that's often the case because they like to be in charge. But you're absolutely right. You're looking for signs of authority, where they sit in the room as well. So if you go into a room, the low status seat is the seat immediately you enter the room. The high status one is facing the door at the top of the table. So there are all these clues that are going on. And you're absolutely right, Joe. Many people don't even consider this. But the fact that you've done this for a while and be very successful, you've picked up on this. And it's a great point you make about involving other people, particularly if you're on Zoom.
Yeah.
There are going to be people who are naturally introverted. And it's very easy to do this. Everybody likes their feathers stroked and their fur tickled. So what I mean by that is everybody likes to be recognized for
Yeah.
something. So if you see someone who's more introverted and the body language and the movement and the head, everything will give you a clue of this. You simply say, look, John, I know you were involved in this big deal last time and you have particular expertise in the legal part of this deal. What are your thoughts on this? We'd love to know.
Yep.
And then you watch people go like this, they go, you get
Yeah.
that? But it's a great technique to get everybody involved,
Yeah.
not just speaking to one person, because you're quite right, Joe. It's not always the person who's the loudmouth who's the one who's
Mm-hmm.
making the decisions.
Yeah. And here's the thing is when I leave that room, they're going to be talking as a group. If I've only actually spoke to 2 of 5 people, the other 3 probably aren't going to vote to have me handle their commercial real estate business. But if I've included everybody in the conversation, they go, yeah, that was, I was involved. So he's really going to include all of us. It's very important.
Absolutely. You've got to build rapport with everybody, not just
Mm-hmm.
with one person. And this is a
Yep.
classic mistake when people are giving presentations or they do public speaking. What they do is they find a friendly face in the room, somebody with a head tilted there who's maybe
Yeah.
smiling and nodding, and they speak to them and ignore everyone else. You've got to make sure you get everybody involved. If you're ever doing a presentation, the trick is, if there's a big enough audience, divide the audience into quarters. Or if it's smaller room, divide it into halves. But make sure you make eye contact with everybody and ask the questions, ask the input. Everybody loves when someone asks their opinion. They say, look,
Yeah.
Joe, you're an expert in this, thinking about buying this house. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thanks
It
for asking,
works.
Derek. Let me tell you.
Yeah, it's something, you put in the book, negotiation is all about effective communication. And, I hadn't looked at it like that, but that is spot on. It is. It's just you're communicating your client's needs.
It is, and there's a likability factor as well. Because remember, we're creatures of emotion. We naturally gravitate towards people that we like.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not logical. So if we're in a negotiation and somebody rubs us up the wrong way, we're going to be looking for reasons not to use. Now think about a glass that's got 50% water, 50% air. The glass is either half full or half empty. Both
Right.
descriptions are correct. So you could look at a deal and think, well, this is either a terrible deal because of the way the person's presented it, or you could look at the positive aspects of it and think, well, yes, there's bits we need to tighten up on, but I like the way the guy delivered it, and I like the whole structure of the deal. So the last thing we want is for people looking for negative things to reinforce their already preconceived negative ideas because we've rubbed them up the wrong way.
Yeah. And that can start from the very beginning. When you walk in a room, the handshake, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I always say with sales and negotiation, it begins way, way before you even get to the room. It's from the moment you get up in the morning. What sort of mood are you in? It's the prep there. And remember, perception is reality. It's not what you say, it's the way you say it and the way you deliver it. You can actually go in. I mean, I've done this training. I've thrown in just complete words that don't make any sense in the middle of a presentation. Nobody's picked up on them. And I said, did anybody notice anything there? They
Yeah.
say no. And I said, I inserted the word bank for no reason whatsoever. Oh, we didn't notice. But what they did notice was the way that the content was delivered. So you're absolutely right. It's all about everything has to be congruent or congruent, I think you guys say. So you come in the room, shake the hand. The ideal is you have this is a big indication. I'm looking for this all the time. Does somebody have a firm handshake? Now, we don't want the grip of a gorilla. We're not trying to break the knuckles.
Right.
We just want to have a firm. Now, what you can do as well is if you are in a position of authority, Joe, and you want to make people seem welcome, and look at some of the politicians, the quite dominant politicians that do this, they will hold their hand like that. That's a subservient handshake, but they're deliberately, it's almost an inversion saying, I'm in control. Here, let
Mm-hmm.
me welcome you. So when you welcome somebody, maybe to the family, or if you welcome a visitor, you go like that. It's a welcoming handshake. But in business, most cases, we want to be doing up and down. And it's about 3 shakes, and that's it. Now, most people don't even have a clue about this. Some of the young people have not been taught all this, so they
Right.
don't know, and they've got a handshake like a wet fish. And that immediately you're going to think, because what's happening, you see, it's quite important, is that when
Yeah.
we first meet, the reptilian brain is kicking in, and it's going, do I like this guy? Yes or
Mm-hmm.
no? Do I
Yeah.
want to fight him?
Yeah.
Do I want to run away? And there's another F that we won't use there for this channel. So this is all going on as we try and work out what's going on there. We're then looking to have our ideas. Is our idea correct? So we're looking for the emotional consistency there. And then we use the logical brain to work things out later on. Think
Yeah.
back about to going to the bus stop with the list. You know, you have to
Yeah.
hack into the emotional part first. The person's going to be shocked that somebody's come up and asked them to marry them with a list. You know, so we have to make sure that we hack into this. And it's important to be conscious. So the body language has to be right, Joe. Eye contact as well. We need to look at somebody in the
Mm-hmm.
eye. We don't want to eyeball them, but we need
Right.
to be able to hold the gaze. Now, here's a big trick for some of you young people. You're going to love this one. And it's a hypnotist trick. If ever you feel uncomfortable staring at somebody's eyes, don't stare at their eyes. Just stare at the spot there in between the eyebrows. It looks like you're staring at the eyes.
Okay.
And that way you can hold somebody's gaze. In fact, I've had competitions with people. They don't know the trick I'm using. And of course, I always win when it comes to eyeballing at training because they are looking at my eyes and I'm looking at theirs. So they're
Right.
progressively becoming more and more hypnotized.
Yeah. Yeah. The eye contact with a handshake is key, especially in our business. Yeah. Or just being
Absolutely.
an
Yeah,
entrepreneur.
absolutely. And the other thing as well is the voice, if we can touch on that briefly, Joe, as well.
Yeah.
But I've noticed in the States, I don't know which parts, but in some parts of America, people go up at the end of the sentence. They've got
Yeah.
it happens in Glasgow, in Scotland here as well. So they kind of talk at the end of the sentence. And it goes up at the end of the sentence and it doesn't sound very convincing. And the reason for that is if we want to give a command, our voice goes down. So if I say, get down,
Mm-hmm.
there's no question that I'm saying it's a command.
Yeah.
Whereas if you think about the Latin languages, French, Spanish, Italian, the way they ask questions, they make a statement and they have an inflection at the end of the voice. So you have to make sure that your body language is confident, the eye contact, the handshake. We don't have excessive movement. We're not twitching. We're not crossing legs. And that our voice is confident as well. And that we have that confidence that we can just take a pause and gain control when we need to. And you can see how that draws you in. So these are some of the more advanced techniques.
And what about cadence when you're talking? Do you put a lot of weight on that?
I think it depends on the bigger the audience, the more you have to add cadence into your tone. If you are doing it in a one-to-one, people may think, as Lawrence Olivier just entered the room. So we need to be a little bit careful. However, as I just did there, you can put in a pause.
Yeah.
Now, this is the trick that people should use. So let's suppose we're talking about the real estate and we go feature, 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 benefit, feature, feature, feature. We have a pause and then go, however, the real benefit of this property is, and then what you can do is you can say what the benefit is and you can mark it out with your hand as well, which is called analog marking. You could say something like, it's trading at a massive discount and there is a fantastic investment opportunity. You see, so we can mark this out. It's more for the realms of public speaking, you would see that done, but you can do it more subtly. You just have to be a little bit careful. But one thing I would say, Joe, is nobody likes to be bored. I mean, I don't know anybody who wakes up and goes, you know what? I can't wait. I've got a boring presentation today. So the way we stop people being bored is think about kids in the car. You take the kids in the car, you go drive, the kids fall asleep. As soon as the car stops, they wake up. Why? There's a change in stimulus. So we want to try and vary the pace if we can, get some expression in there, and then pause for the key points.
Very good. You know, in the book, you said if you want somebody to like you, show that you actually like them. And I thought, man, that is taking it to the basics, but that is so spot on. If you have the whole you when you walk in, your body language, the way you're talking is just not something that this person is going to like, you're done before you even start.
Well, correct. And this is where it comes from. This is the big secret. It's state control. Imagine that you get up in the morning, you're driving off, you're going across Los Angeles, you've got to get to this client meeting, you're sitting thinking, oh God, I've got this terrible company to see. They're so rude. Oh, I better get it over and done with.
Yeah.
Open the door. Remember, the outer expression is a reflection of the thought. Unless you're some sort of method actor that can flip it quickly, you're going to have to get working pretty quickly. Now, what you could do is reframe that. That's where we take a situation and we look at it in a different way. So instead of saying this is a difficult climb, we go, great, I've got a fantastic opportunity today. This is a really tough meeting. I've been wanting to work on my communication skills. I'm really going to try and get these guys on site. I'm going to show a huge amount of interest in them and try and find out everything about them. Notice the difference? You can hear even my voice changes when I'm doing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's one thing I was doing when I was starting off in business is I have to go give pitch at banks and there'd be a group of people and I dreaded it mostly because I was scared shitless, right? But
Yeah.
I just couldn't. I wasn't. And now I just look at it as here's an opportunity for more business to get our company name out there with this bank. I may not get this deal, but maybe I'll get the next one. And what a difference! It took so much. It just being open, and I just wasn't open before.
Yeah, absolutely. And think about this as well. We're trying to do something a bit different. We're trying to behave like a human. Think about your standard pitch. If I look back to the investment industry, it kind of goes along the lines of you get shown into a room, you get some nice coffee, you sit there, and then out comes the pitch deck, which is a load of slides with size 6 font, double axis graphs. It's so confusing that even Einstein couldn't understand it. That's not, and everybody does the same thing. How different would it be if you went in and said, I'm here, I'd really like to find out about you and your client. I've got a big pitch deck. We can go through it if you want, but I'd really like to find out what it is that you want and how we can help you. I'll refer to some of the material if needs be, but I don't think we don't want to bore you.
Yeah.
It's much better, isn't it? It's a different approach. It's just two human beings having a discussion, trying to help each other out. Because don't forget, the very reason you're there is the fact they have a problem or something they want assistance with, I would assume. Because otherwise, why would you be there? You don't go to the doctor if you're not well, do you?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
when we're recruiting, Derek, I used to kind of go in and talk about, you'd have somebody sitting across from you there with another brokerage, you're trying to recruit them in, and you go in. A lot of brokers, they just sit and pitch. They've got the pitch deck for the recruiting, and they're going through it top to bottom. And I did that a few times, and it bored the hell out of me. And I'm like, you know what? It's not that different. All the commercial real estate companies aren't that different. So what I do now is I just sit down with them. I talk. I said, okay, this is what sets us apart. And there's a few points, and I go through the points really quickly. I said, but now I want to hear about you because our company really focuses on company culture, and
fantastic.
I have to be in the office every day, so I want to be around people I really want to be around, right? So I
Fantastic.
will ask them, tell me about yourself. What are your passions, family, all of it, and it's taking our hit rate for recruiting up considerably because they actually know that you actually care about them, and they know about the company, they've done the research, they just don't know some of the deal points that I explained to them. But that makes a difference because I've talked to our agents after they're onboarded. They go, nobody else asked me about my family, nobody else
Yeah.
asked me about my hobbies, nobody else, I didn't feel like anybody's listening to me, they were just telling me about their company. And so it's just listening to your the people you're interviewing made a big difference.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you could try and do when you're with people, one of the things I always look for is what I call a hot button. Now,
Yeah,
everybody has a hot button. If you started speaking to me, and I mean, I sometimes have a bit of fun. Obviously, I do my books and I have a bit of fun. So I'll sometimes throw in that I'm writing a new book. And guess what? Nobody actually says, that's interesting, Derek. What's it about? They just, yeah, it's fun. So, but I do it for fun. But if somebody turns around to me and starts talking about electric guitars, and 80s rock music, immediately, pal for life.
yeah,
So everybody has this hot button. And guess what, Joe? The more obscure that hot button is, and the more you recognize it, the bigger the rapport building. So if somebody
mm-hmm.
collects corks, people do collect corks and wine bottles. Some of your audience might do. It's a little bit of an unusual hobby, but those that do collect corks are really into it. So if they meet somebody else that has the same interest, then it works well. Now, before the Bribery Act came in the UK, when I was still working for companies, I would take clients to rock concerts. So we would go and see a lot of the American rock bands actually would come across and tour, and I would get an ensemble together and we would go. And that built massive rapport. So guess what?
Sure.
When it came to doing the pitch for the latest fund manager, how easy was it to get them to the table?
Yeah.
Because of the law of reciprocity. I'd given them something they want. They helped me out with something that I need to fill in, which is kind of what I want
Of
indirectly.
course. Yeah, and you found a commonality, and that's, if you can find a commonality with somebody, that
Yeah,
opens
and
a lot of doors.
it does. And do you know what's really useful about that as well is I found by getting on people's wavelength and really pressing that hot button, I didn't do it cynically. I was genuinely interested in what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
that you get the real inside track.
Yep.
So you would find out why you didn't get the pitch, not the usual, well, you get the standard response. It's almost like the interview response, isn't it? We liked what you did and da. You get the real answer, which is like, we can't go with this because da. You go, thanks very much. That's really useful to know. It's a
Yeah.
kind of off the record comment. That's what comes from building a rapport. And you're absolutely right, Joe. I mean, the more that you can get people involved and build rapport with them, the more they're going to do for you. It's just the way we're wired. We can't help it. We seek for similarity. Well, most of us do. If we find we've got things in common, if we find we've both gone to the same school, we're from the same state, we like skiing, we like golf, we've got the same political persuasion, we're building rapport pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
People want
can't
to do
help it.
business with people they have something in common with. If you don't have anything in common, you're less likely to get the business.
Exactly. And this is why it's very useful to be a chameleon and to have a little bit of knowledge about a lot of topics, because somebody, I mean, I'm not really into fishing, but if somebody was into fishing, I know enough about it to
Mm-hmm.
talk to them and I know enough to show an interest in it. I'm unlikely to go fishing with them, but at least they'll think the guy was interested in fishing. I once took somebody for lunch who was a big rower and I know nothing about rowing. But by the end of it, he thought I was fascinated by rowing. In fact, it was interesting to learn a lot. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye. So just by
Yeah.
asking questions. And that's
Well, you
that's
also took
one
the
of the techniques.
opportunity to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you want to destroy rapport, just just look for differences. Find out if they don't vote the same way as you, if they've got a different religion, if they, their music taste is different. Just look for all the differences and watch how quickly the rapport destroys to the point where some people won't even sit in the same room after that.
Right. Yeah, I feel you. Well, Derek, this has been a ton of information. I've taken a lot more of your time today than I planned on,
No
but
problem, my
the
pleasure.
information was incredible. So thank you very much. I would like to get you back on. Let's take a look. And actually, if anybody has questions for Derek, put it in the comments down below. If you want to go look at Derek's books, make sure you let me know which one you want us to do next. I'll see about if Derek will be kind enough to come back on with us. But Derek, thank you very much.
My pleasure, Joe. Thanks again.
Appreciate taking the time. For those of you watching, if you could, please give us a like. And if you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe. And I'm going to put the link to Derek's book down below so you can find it. I highly suggest you take a read. This is a pretty short read. And so it's a couple hundred pages, but that 200 pages is a different lifestyle for you, I think, in sales. So check it out.